Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Sodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Sodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Sodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Astatar Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Janmastami Ki Jai Gaur Premananda All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. So in my attempt to glorify Srimati Radharani on her appearance day, I'm going to start by reading a verse from the Brahma Samhita, text 537, and the translation by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who was the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada had his BBT publish this edition of the Brahma Samhita. So text, I'll read it myself, the Sanskrit and the translation, and then the commentary by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, some of it. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bis Tabirya Eva Nijarupataya Kalabihi Goloka eva nivasata kilatma bhuto, Govinda madi purusham tamaham bhajami. And the translation by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati: I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic qualities, in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa. And I'll read some of the purport. Although the Lord Absolute and his potency are one and the self-same existence, still they exist eternally as separate entities, as Radha and Krishna. In both the ecstatic energy and the transcendental Lord Krishna, there exists Shringara Rasa, amorous love, whose quality is inconceivable. So, in this verse, it's being indicated that Radharani and her associates, the gopis, are imbued with the transcendental pleasure potency, which includes 64 artistic qualities. And in the purport, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati lists those 64 artistic abilities. And some of them are what you would expect: the ability to sing, the ability to dance, the ability to compose wonderful poetry, the ability to cook very nicely. All these things are mentioned. And then there's some more seemingly esoteric things that are mentioned. And some of you are going to wonder, how am I going to turn a talk about Srimati Radharani into something that has to do with science? Well, I'll try. The 48th artistic ability that's mentioned in the list of 64 is Mlecha Kutarka Vikalpana. And that means to fabricate barbarous or foreign sophistry. So sophistry means to use fallacious arguments in an attempt to deceive. So I always notice that one of Srila Prabhupada's favorite activities with his leading disciples was for Srila Prabhupada to fabricate fallacious arguments of the kind that the material scientists engage in. You know, so he would challenge his disciples. He said, okay, the scientists, they say life comes from matter. What do you say? And you know, they would try to give some answers, and he'd come up with more fallacious arguments. So it appears this is a pastime that Krishna and the gopis and Srimati Radharani also engage in, the Mlecha Kutarka Vikalpana. Mlecha, of course, means people who are outside the Vedic culture, and Kutarka means they're bad arguments, and Vikalpana means to make it up as a kind of sport. And sport is often training for real-life situations as well. You know, what one learns on the football field or the basketball field or the soccer field is also applied in real life. So that's a connection with scientific discussion that I found. But in terms of our philosophy, Radharani represents one of Krishna's energies. And it's stated in the Vedic literature, Parashya Shaktir Vividaya Vishuryate. The Lord has many energies, but they're divided into principally three energies: Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta, Kshetrajakya Tata Para, Avidya Karma Samgamyam, Tritiya Shakta Ishite. That's from the Vishnu Purana. States that the Lord has his spiritual potency, his internal potency, which is totally transcendental. And then he has his material potency, and then his marginal potency, which is between the two. So the internal potency is described as having the features of Sat Chit Ananda, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. Krishna has these qualities of eternality, knowledge, and bliss. And the potency that establishes the eternal features of the spiritual world is called the Sandini potency. And as far as knowledge is concerned, that's under the Samvit potency. And as far as Ananda, or pleasure, is concerned, that is the Hladini Shakti, which Srimati Radharani is the personification of. So that is the ontological position of Srimati Radharani. She is the personified pleasure potency of the Supreme Lord. So ultimately they're one, but at the same time they're two, eternally different. So that was demonstrated in the incarnation of Lord Chaitanya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahayanya. The Lord decided that he wanted to do a few things. He wanted to understand, Lord Krishna wanted to understand the position of Srimati Radharani. He wanted to understand what qualities in himself inspired such attraction by Srimati Radharani. He wanted to understand her feelings of love and devotion for him. So to do that, he came to this world in a combined form of Radha and Krishna. And sometimes to his very intimate devotees like Ramananda Roy, he revealed that. He showed them his form as Radha and Krishna. So Lord Chaitanya also came to demonstrate how to enter into that mood of service, loving devotional service to Krishna, by playing the role of a devotee of Krishna, to show us how ultimately to enter into that mood of loving devotional service to Krishna. So there is extensive information in the Vedic literature about Srimati Radharani and her pastimes and paraphernalia. In the Nectar of Instruction, Rupa Goswami mentions that Her Kunda, Radha Kunda, is one of the most sacred places in the universe. So there's an interesting account given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur about how Radha Kunda, it's not different from Radharani, came into existence. Krishna was out herding cows, and a demon named Aristasura took the form of a large bull and attacked Krishna. And Krishna pushed him away, and he fell unconscious because Krishna pushed him so hard. So when he regained consciousness, he charged Krishna again, and Krishna grabbed him by the legs and swung him over his head in a circle and then threw him away, and the demon expired, died. Then, by previous arrangement, Srimati Radharani was coming with her friends, her gopi friends and associates, to meet with Krishna. And she approached, and she learned that Krishna had just killed a bull. So she said, I'm not going to associate with you because you have killed a cow, a bull. And Krishna said, no, it was a demon disguised as a bull. And she wouldn't accept that. She said, I've heard from Madhu Mangala's grandmother, Purnamasi, that there was a demon named Vritrasura, and he was killed by Indra, who was the head of the demigods, very holy person, but he had to be punished because Vritrasura, although he was a demon, was a Brahmin. So you can't say, just because this demon turned into the form of a cow that you didn't kill him. And she said, I'm not going to have anything to do with you until you've purified yourself. And Krishna says, how can I do that? And Radharani told him, you have to bathe in all of the sacred rivers all over the universe. You have to go to them and do that. And then I'll consider that you've made up for that offense of killing the bull. So Krishna said, well, what if I tell you I can bring all the sacred rivers right here? So she said, look, I'm just a simple cowherd girl. I don't know if you can do that or not. And Krishna said, okay, just watch. So he struck the ground with his right heel, and a big pit opened up in the ground. He just dug it out with his feet. And then he said, I'm going to call all the sacred rivers here. So all the personified sacred rivers over the whole universe came, and they asked Krishna what they wanted, what he wanted from them. He said, I'd like you to fill this pit with your water. So they agreed to do that. So Krishna said, okay, now is everything okay? He said, oh, looks like it. And he said, now I'm going to ask you to bathe in this lake, Shamakund, it's called. He said, no, I'm not going to do that, because that water is contaminated with your sinful activities, because that is like the system. Like the reason the Ganges River didn't want to come to Earth, the Ganges is a celestial river, comes ultimately from the causal ocean, which a little bit of which entered the universe when Vamandev took 3 footsteps and covered the whole universe. He knocked a little hole in the coverings of the universe, and some of the water from the causal ocean came in. And there was a king on earth, Bhagivati, who wanted to bring the Ganges to earth, but she wouldn't come. She said, if people take bath in my waters, I'll have to absorb their offenses. So, of course, he eventually convinced her to come, and she came. But at first, Radharani was reluctant to do that. And Krishna said, well, look, anyways, just see what I've done. I've brought all the sacred rivers here, created Shamakund. This will be noted down through history. But what have you and your gopi friends done? You've just sold a little yogurt and ghee in the nearby towns, so who's going to remember you? So she manifested her transcendental anger, mana. So I'll show you, she noticed that nearby was a hoof print left by Aristasura before he was killed by Krishna. And she took one of her bangles, she broke it off her wrist, and she began digging in that footprint, expanding it and deepening it. And then thousands of the other gopis, they joined in. They took off their bangles and they were also digging. And very soon they had a big pit. And Krishna was a little impressed, and he said, okay, let me fill it with the water from Shamakunda that I got from all the rivers, sacred rivers. And then she said, no, I told you that's contaminated. I don't want that. I'm going to get some water from Manasi Ganga. So Manasi Ganga came about because once Krishna's father, Nanda Maharaj, and all of the gopas, the cowherd men of Vrindavan, they wanted to go to the Ganges River and take bath. But the Ganges River was about 100 miles from where they were. So Krishna said, oh, don't go all the way there. I'll bring the Ganges here. And Ganges appeared in a pond, a lake, near Govardhan Hill called Manasi Ganga. And actually, anytime the cowherd men, Nanda and the cowherd men, wanted to go anywhere, to some sacred place, pilgrimage place, a long distance away, Krishna would bring it to Vrindavan. So when you go on parikrama in Vrindavan today, you can visit all the different sacred places because they are represented within the 168 square miles of Vrindavan. So then the rivers, the waters, the sacred rivers, the personalities of the sacred rivers in Shamakund asked Krishna, look, can't we, you're having this quarrel with Srimati Radharani, but can't we, I know that, but can't we just fill up her Kund? And Krishna said, oh, okay, it's okay with me, but now you ask her permission. So she gave her permission, and on that day, at that hour, the Radha Kunda came into existence because the sacred waters, they filled it up and Radharani took bath in Shama Kund, and Krishna took bath in Radha Kund, and everything was settled. So those two kunds are there today, and there was a benediction that anyone that takes bath in those kunds on that day, the appearance day of Radha Kund, which is in the 8th day of the waning moon in the month of Kartik in Vrindavan. So on that day, a few years ago, I happened to be in Vrindavan, and the custom is people, Vaishnavas, they circumambulate Govardhan Hill, and they come to Radha Kund, and then at midnight, it's called Ardharatra Snana, half midnight, half the night through, at midnight, bathe in those kunds. And there's a lot of devotees come and they offer candles into the kunds, and so pretty amazing event. So how much time do we have? Okay, 7:50. So so it was very nice. Of course, Srila Prabhupada ordered his disciples that they not physically enter Radha Kund or Shama Kund, not like dive in there. Just take a little water and put it on your head. So that's what I did. Of course, there are priests there to help you do these things, but you take a little water from Radha Kund, a little water from Shama Kund, and then again a little water from Radha Kund. So that's there. And the appearance place of Radharani was in Varshana, which was the place where her father Vrishabhanu lived, and she appeared to him. There are different accounts of how she appeared: in a lotus flower, in a box. Radharani did appear there and grew up there and had many pastimes there. Like there's one place, the temple there today, the Varli Lal temple, is on the top of a hill. It's the Brahma Hill, it's called, and Lord Brahma wanted to do some service for Radha and Krishna, so he manifested the hill that Varshana is located on, and the hill that Nandagram, Krishna's place when he was a child, was located. But off that hill of Varshana, there's a place called Shankari Kor. It's a very, very narrow pass, like a little ravine, very rocky and stony. And from time to time, Radharani and her cowherd girlfriends would go through that pass to get to a town where they would sell their butter and yogurt and ghee and things like that. So sometimes Krishna and the cowherd boys would go to that pass when they knew Radharani was coming, and they would block it. And Krishna would say, "You can't come through here without paying a tax, without paying a fine." They would go, "What? Well, we never heard of this. who gave you the authority? And they would. So there were arguments that would go on, and sometimes Krishna would take their pots of milk, grab them from you. Haven't paid the tax, smash them. So I mean, eventually they would work everything out, but that's something that would happen. Probably many of you have been to that particular place. So, but to enter into those kinds of pastimes requires training. It requires tapodivyam putraka yena sattvam, divine austerities to come to that kind of position. Srila Prabhupada presented his Krishna book to us Western people, non-devotees. And, on the cover of that book, there is a beautiful portrait of Radha and Krishna. And he writes in his introduction or preface, I forget which, people sometimes ask, who is that girl with Krishna? So, yes, we wonder that. Us people who weren't born as Gaudiya Vaishnavas or any kind of Vaishnava, we wonder, who is that girl with Krishna? God has a girlfriend. But we can't make the mistake of thinking it's like our mundane experience of such things. It's something on a much higher level. It's compared to the difference between prema, transcendental love of Krishna, and the so-called love in the material world, which is really one form of kama or selfish desires. It's like the difference between gold and iron. So we're being presented with a vision of such things as a goal that we can aspire after. But the first thing is to learn how to become a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Lord Chaitanya said, Jivara Swarupa Hoy Krishnara Nityadas. The eternal position of the soul is to be loving servant of Krishna. And all of these great personalities, even Krishna's direct expansions like Balaram and Srimati Radharani and so many others, they think of themselves as servants of Krishna. Ekala Ishvara Krishna Arasabhabritya. This is explained in great deal by Krishnadas Kaviraj in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He explains this in great detail. All of these personalities, they see themselves as the servants of Krishna. So that's the first thing that someone like me has to recognize, that I'm a servant. And that means activities of service. And that means cooperating. It means going against practically everything that a person in the Western world is taught to be. Independent, I don't serve anyone, no God, no master, as they say in France. So it kind of goes against it. So learning how to be a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the first step. And Lord Chaitanya makes that very easy comparatively speaking, in this age of Kali, makes it very easy for us to do that by performing the Sankirtan Yajna. And that involves things like taking Krishna's message in the form of books, distributing them to the public, worshiping the deities, which means being on a very strict schedule. Many of us don't like to be on a very strict schedule, but it is absolutely necessary in the service of Radha Giridhari, and means so many other kinds of surrender to purify our sense of being independent enjoyers. So that process is there. And then gradually we can come to understand, once we understand that we are servants, we can gradually come to understand what kind of servant we are. There are different relationships that it's possible for a soul to have with Krishna. There are different rasas, or relationships. And it starts with Shanta Rasa, passive appreciation. And, you just see that, like in this world. Sometimes people, they passively appreciate or worship somebody, either some film star or music recording artist or sports figure or political figure or whatever. They don't have any relationship with that personality, but other than, like be a fanboy or whatever, fan. You appreciate. But then beyond that is dasya ras, actual service. Like somebody who's a fan of someone, they might get an opportunity to actually work for that person. And then they're, all right, the person is now their employer and they're the employee. It's kind of an unequal relationship. So that's dasya ras, service. And then someone might be an employee, but then become the friend of the person. That's Sakya Ras, friendship, equals, no longer on different platforms, but equals. And then, beyond that, there's the Vatsalya Ras, where the personality becomes the subordinate and the other person becomes the superior, but out of love, out of a desire to protect the object of devotion, protect, nourish, take care of. In other words, it's a parental kind of relationship, like the relationship between parent and child. And then beyond that, there's the conjugal relationship, the romantic, loving relationship, which may be of two varieties, married and unmarried. So those kinds of relationships are possible for a soul to have with the Supreme Soul, Krishna. And it's all under the control of Srimati Radharani. To get to Krishna, you got to go through Radharani. She has to see that one is in a service mood to Krishna, that one is properly trained and qualified to enter into such a relationship. So that's why Jai Shri Radhe, Radha Giridhari Ki Jai. So I'll take that as a sign to bring this talk to a close. Thank you very much. And that's why everyone in Vrindavan is going, Radhe, Radhe, Jai Shri Radhe. Have to please Radharani in order to get to Krishna. Hare Krishna. Shri Janmashtami, Radhastami, Ki Jai. So, anybody have anything